And I think that the what I think of as the lost civilization was largely a maritime civilization, living along coastlines, living on the best lands during the Ice Age, because inland it was arid, it was cold. The ice meant there was no rain. Right. No rain. It was totally desert. Very, very difficult to live. But on the coasts, things were much better. And it was precisely the coasts that were inundated when mysteriously and suddenly the Ice Age ended, and all that ice started to melt down and went back into the ocean, and the sea levels rose.
And you think that, I mean, I've read all your books. I read Supernatural as well, which is one of my more favorite, or more what I found more fascinating, because you really stepped out on some serious limbs on that one.
Yeah.
You know,
I kind of did, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you come from the journey from being a journalist who was covering this thing in Ethiopia to Supernatural, which insinuates that humanity has probably learned a good deal of what we are and what we become because of psychedelic drugs.
I believe that's absolutely the case, and I think that with the current demonization of psychedelic drugs in our society, it's a huge mistake.
How much resistance have you felt from that book?
Well, I've had an enormous amount of resistance to it because we have had a mind programming exercise called the War on Drugs for the last 40 years, which has been designed to create an internal enemy in our societies and convince people that there are these evil, wicked groups who are doing these terrible, sinful things, smoking these drugs and doing this and that. And there's a very dark image has been created around it, and people get very upset irrationally about this whole issue. And actually, what's been forgotten in all of this, and for me has become, I regard it as an extremely important issue, is that when the state sends us to prison for essentially exploring our own consciousness, this is a grotesque abuse of human rights. It's a fundamental wrong. If I, as an adult, am not, sovereign over my own consciousness, then I'm absolutely not sovereign over anything. I can't claim any kind of freedom at all. And what has happened over the last 40 or 50 years under the disguise of the war on drugs is that we have been persuaded to hand over the keys of our consciousness to the state. The most precious, the most intimate, the most sapient part of ourselves, the state now has the keys. And furthermore, they've persuaded us that that's in our interests. This is a very dangerous situation.
Have you ever? There was an article that was recently published about people and creativity, and that everyone says they love creative ideas, but the truth is, amongst non-creative people, creative ideas make them confrontational, make them upset, make them defensive. When you start talking about experiences like psychedelic experiences, one of the things that always freaks me out is the people's inability to even consider that there's a difference between a psychedelic experience on drugs and a drug that's going to ruin your life.
Yeah,
they're not even interested in considering that possibility. There's two different. It's like the same thing. It's like someone resisting.
Definitely, and that's the result. Let's remember that
programming
funded with our money. Our taxpayers' money, there has been 40 years of programming, more than 40 years on this subject, to make us all develop a kind of aversion, a fear, a hatred, the horror of drugs. And it's just fundamentally wrong in so many ways. Look, quite a number of illegal drugs are actually really bad and really dangerous, and they will totally fuck you up in all kinds of ways. But I believe that the sovereignty of the adult over his or her own body and his or her own mind trumps everything else.
Sure.
And we must have the right to make our mistakes.
Yes.
We already have laws in our society for punishing bad behavior. If somebody on drugs goes out and gets in somebody else's face and causes them trouble, we already have laws to deal with that. We don't need new laws that control our consciousness and rigidly place it in a prison and actually place us in prison if we explore
such an
that
important point what you just said, that we already have laws to keep people from doing bad things.
Yes.
It's so important.
We don't, yeah.
It seems so logical. It's so clear. If you can drink and not do anything bad, go drink.
Right.
Exactly.
If you can smoke pot and not do anything bad to your fellow human,
go smoke pot. If that's what you want to do, if that's your adult decision, that's your choice. What does liberty mean if it doesn't mean that?
Well,
if
people
mean the
will
right?
get into this ridiculous, just obey the law. Why is it such a hard time? What are you, a druggie? You need drugs to get through this life. And I always say, this is such an illogical argument, because imagine if we were on an island, we were the only people on the planet, and there was only 4 of us. There was only 4 of us, and one of us wanted to smoke pot, and we said, "No, we got to lock this guy and put in a fucking cage. He's crazy." And
it's nice to reduce it to that to 4. Then you really see the dynamics.
You see how silly it is. Like what you would just lock this guy up in a cage. You can't smoke pot. We made a law against it.
Yeah.
Like what? And that 4 is just as ridiculous as 4 million or 400 million or what. It's just as ridiculous.
It's an extraordinary thing, and you have to consider what it's led to in our society in all kinds of ways. It's led to the creation of huge armed bureaucracies who have the right to break into our homes, smash down our doors, humiliate us in every possible way, ruin our lives with criminal records, and all because what? We're smoking some natural herb which affects our own consciousness in some way. So again, I say, if we get into the faces of others, the state may have a role to play, and it does, and it already has elaborate rules for dealing with that. But for the state to have transgressed the consciousness of free sovereign adults is a grotesque abuse of human rights. And it doesn't work. This is the other thing. If the state could turn around and say, the war on drugs has worked, we have reduced the consumption of this, that, it's not true. They haven't reduced the consumption of any drugs. The consumption of all illegal drugs has gone up and up and up and up and up. Let's take another drug, tobacco. You never got sent to jail for smoking tobacco. You never got your life ruined or your front door broken down. But some years ago, people cottoned on to the notion that tobacco actually may be making us pretty unwell if we're smoking a lot of tobacco. Seems to be a connection with lung cancer. And this information was put forward. Look what's happened with tobacco in the last 20 years. Millions and millions of adults all over the world presented with that information have taken a personal sovereign decision to stop smoking cigarettes. I took that decision when I was 38 years old. I'm 61 now. I used to smoke 40 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
And I was a journalist, cigarette hanging out the mouth, typewriter. I was a heavy smoker, but I took the decision. I came to the conclusion this is not good for my body.
Stephen King said that it was a neurotransmitter and enhancer that he suffered when he stopped smoking. Well, so many writers.
Helped him write.
Like when you were a writer, why did you smoke so much as a writer?
It helps. Yeah, it does. It definitely did. It definitely did help, as does marijuana. But the fact is that the point that I want to make is that if the state was really interested in helping us. This is how the war on drugs is presented. We're concerned about your health, so we're going to send you to prison. We're concerned about the harm this drug is doing to you, so we're going to send you to prison. What's more harmful, the harm the drug is doing or being sent to prison? It seems to me pretty obvious that the being sent to prison is a much more harmful thing that's being done. If the state was really concerned about harm, then the solution is not to criminalize people for taking drugs. The solution is to present them with very good information which they believe. Part of the problem is that the state has become to be regarded as so corrupt that any message emanating from the state about drugs is not believed anymore, completely disbelieved. So once again, we come to this issue of adult sovereignty over consciousness. And our right also to make mistakes with our own body if we do that. That's what I believe we're here on this earth to learn and to grow and to develop. And we have to have adult responsibility to do that. Always astonishes me in America, where you have the Republican Party, which is strongly in favor of individual freedoms, that it's often Republicans who are the ones who are most anti-drugs. I feel drugs is a Republican issue. I think that any true Republican should absolutely champion the right of every adult individual, if they choose to do so, to explore their own consciousness with any drugs they choose.
Yeah, there's no real parties anymore. It's just